let's do it.
Welcome to the inaugural blog of Berrien Birders. I'm Matt,
And I'm Josh.
and we hope that we've got some content that you're going to enjoy. Starting off this year, we've got some fun things to talk about. In this episode, we're going to be talking about some county listing fun, which includes Northern Shrike. We're going to talk about a trip I made to the Everglades that had some pretty fun birds as well. So, it's a new year. What better way to ring in a new year than with a red-tailed hawk in front of a sunrise? What does New Year mean to you, Josh?
New Year, well, since, I've kind of started birding the last 2 or 3 years, well, first of all, New Year's Eve is my daughter's birthday, so it's always a party on New Year's Eve. But then the new year itself, for me, I've kind of made it a tradition to go out and have myself a big day and try to find as many species as I can. On the first of the year, because everything starts over. It's a brand new year, and I'm not super competitive. It's just fun to everything starts over and every bird is new. Like you said, the red-tailed hawk it's a brand new bird for the year.
It's a new year and a new county list, and however
Exactly.
you like to list is fine. Some people don't want to list at all. Some of us try to see how many birds we can see each year. Part of it for me is the fun of looking for, trying to actively seek out some of the difficult to find birds. So in this early winter period where passively, you can hope for, hey, a hairy woodpecker on my bird feeder, which just happened to Josh a few minutes ago while my bird feeder is completely empty. Seeking out the uncommon things. For us here in Southwest Michigan, that means white-winged gulls and rare ducks. Which we haven't found a whole lot of, so we're going to hold that for now. It means looking for rare owls, which we're going to talk about next week because we just might have some video of some less common owls. It also means Northern Shrike. And Northern Shrike is one of those birds that it's easy to miss. You have to actively look for it. And if you wait until February, red-winged blackbirds are coming back, and then red-winged blackbirds are sitting on top of all the trees, and you just stop for every single red-winged blackbird, and you're not going to find a shrike out of all those things. So the other reason to talk about shrike was that Mary Jo found one relatively recently. Now,
She's found the last two, I have to say, for me at least. So the last 2 years in a row, Mary Jo has found the first shrike of the year. So
we'll have to see if we can break that string next year. However, how many times did it take you to find that shrike?
It took me 3. It was my third time's the charm for me.
It took me 7, actually. There's a lot of enemies when you're trying to find shrikes, and one of them is red-tailed hawks. That part of my experience is that if there's a raptor visible, the shrike's not going to be visible. And so this red-tail was perching over the shrike field where I was desperately hoping the shrike would show up, and it just wasn't showing up. So I started driving around. Saying, okay, what else can I find? And I found birds sitting on top. It's a kestrel. I was really hoping that kestrel was going to be the shrike. But then I stopped and watched one hover, which I thought was a pretty cool thing.
Very cool thing.
That there's 2 birds in the Midwest, 2 raptors that hover for us. One is kestrel. One is the other one is rough-legged hawk, which we may get back to next week.
Very cool. Real quick, Matt. So we talk about shrike, and I think you've answered this question before, kind of amusingly, but what type of habitat? We had the shrike over kind of in that marshy area. It was next to some ag fields with some sparse trees. Like, what would you consider, like, when you're looking for shrike this time of year, what do you look for?
For me, what you're looking for with shrike is, exactly that, a brushy kind of fields, things that's going to have mice. That we'll talk about keys to trying to find a short-eared owl later on in this year, but finding places that can have mice, that's the main thing the shrikes are going to be eating right now. And one of the giveaway other species may be kestrels, since the kestrels are also looking for mice. So if you've got areas that have good numbers of kestrels, you may be able to find shrikes, but kestrels like a little more open areas. The shrikes like more brushy kind of fields, which makes the habitat a little bit different there. But for me, I kept driving around and I kept finding kestrels instead. Here's a female kestrel. This was actually 2 kestrels that were together. And I did a little bit of reading that usually you see kestrels solitary. According to a study that they did in Ohio, about 8% of the time a male and a female will be together. Here's the male of that group. The female caught the mouse and the male made no attempt to steal it from her. So I think presumably they must be tolerating each other. The
Yeah.
Ohio
Yeah.
study said that typically it was a male and a female. So you would ask, well, is this just a male with one of his offspring from the year before? But you would think that if so, then it would be 50-50 whether it was a male and a female together. Whereas they were finding it was pretty much just a male and a female if they were going to share a winter territory. So presumably has some hopes for Mrs. Wright having the mouse there.
Yeah, and it seems like there's been, for me or with Kestrel, last few years, it seems like sometimes it's hit or miss, but this, I don't know, past month or so, especially during CBC's Christmas bird counts towards the end of 2024, a lot of Kestrels on the wires around, which is a good thing.
It feels like it's been a good year for them. And I don't know how cyclical their population is, or it just depends on the local weather. But yeah, I was definitely finding good numbers of them around. Here we've cut into blue jays. Blue jays are another bird that I constantly stop for, thinking I've got a shrike. They even have that white flash and that long outer tail. So that's another bird who's like, I've got one, until you actually have it. So here, buried way back there, is the Northern Shrike in kind of the brushy field that you were mentioning, that they don't always tee up. This one at least had like a single territory. A lot of times they'll have pretty big territories and they'll move around, and you have to go to the areas where they've been seen several times, hoping to connect with it when it's making its circle of trying to find its local mice or what have you.
What's the density like for these guys? Because it seems like, it's not a bird really you can expect to go run into. So how many of these do you think are in Berrien County right now? Do you think there's just the one? Do you think there's maybe a couple that just aren't being detected?
I bet there's more. Certainly that area where Mary Jo found it last year, over more in the eastern part of the county, I had kind of mentally committed to having to go look over there until she found this bird. So I bet there's probably one over there. I would say about 50% of years people will find one in the Berrien Springs CBC, so somewhere in the central county we'll have Northern Shrike. So this is a bird that is around, but you have to actively seek. Their numbers probably similar to the owls, get a little bit more in March when they're starting to come back from, if there's some in Indiana or Ohio or what have you, and filter back through the state to the north. So their numbers probably go up, but they're totally hidden by then amongst the blackbirds. It may also be worth kind of getting into some of the things that separate northern from loggerhead. That this time of year it's just northern, but loggerhead.
You mentioned this time of year, and I'm sure you're probably just getting to it. But what's the window for overlap there?
Yeah, according to eBird, March and a little bit into April, there is kind of some overlap, and either one could conceivably be found. But you see on this bird, a couple times it's flashed. It's got a pretty thin mask. It's got a pale base to the bill, if you can kind of get a sense to that. Those are some of the things you're looking at. This is a different Northern Shrike, a montage I put together from a few years ago. And it just kind of shows you where that white flash is in the wings. This one kept its tail pretty tight, so you can't really see the white in the tail on it. Next up, if the video advances, I think it's going. Here we go. Waiting. So here's kind of a compare and contrast of, again, a different Northern Shrike and a loggerhead from Florida from a couple of weeks ago, that you can see Northern Shrike is a pretty thin black mask. It's really more kind of an eye line, more so than a straight up trash panda raccoon full-on black mask that includes the lures the way the loggerhead does. Loggerhead is a shorter bill. Northern's is a little bit longer. That pale
it looks
base.
Like it has. You mentioned the mask, and I think I just read this, and now that you have the photo up, I'm seeing it. Is there white around the eye on a Northern? Is that always there, or is that just more likely to have that white because the mask is thinner?
I think they have a paler lures on average. We'd have to go look at a bunch of pics, but I mean, the loggerhead, the black, goes all the way through the entire bill. That it's impressive there. This picture doesn't really show it. Loggerhead typically has kind of a deeper gray upper parts, whereas Northern's a little paler. And then the Northern has it will still show some barring. That those pictures I had of that one that we've had here in Berrien aren't good enough to really see the
Yeah.
barring. But up close, you can see that there's barring present on a good number of northern shrikes. It's not
Loggerhead
going to be
doesn't show
present.
the barring typically.
Well, I mean, an adult is not going to have it. Now, that being said, if you blunder into a young one, which I thought I had this teed up such that we would get there. Here's a
Oh,
young
nice.
loggerhead from, this is from the Badlands. And now we're skipping ahead in the wrong direction. No fun. No bueno. Got to get this full things worked out. But you can see that it has a decent amount of barring on this young loggerhead, which
Okay, yeah.
I mean, this shot is from July, so who knows how long it takes them to lose it. But certainly by this time of year, at least in Florida,
You
they
took
had.
this?
Yeah, that's a picture from the Badlands
Awesome
of
shot.
well, at this point,
Amazing.
10 years ago. Um,
How old's that bird, do you think?
that's
Looks
straight
like
out
a
of the nest.
barely a, yeah, let's say it looks like a fledgling.
Yeah, those birds. There were a whole batch of them kind of clustered in this little patch of cottonwoods, which we just kind of happened by. I'm like, hey, there's activity, and then the activity was a whole family of loggerhead shrikes. I'm like, okay, we're gonna give this a minute, kids.
Very
Sit
cool.
back and Dad's gonna take a moment. Speaking of taking the kids somewhere, I took them to Florida relatively recently.
Hey,
And we walked the Anhinga Trail in Everglades National Park. And Anhinga's a cool bird. We're going to get it one of these years in Berrien. Anhinga's known by a bunch of things. Have you heard some of the other names for Anhinga?
snake bird, I
Snake
think I've
bird.
heard.
Here's one, and here's part of the reason why. That's just swimming around with his neck sticking above the water, and they don't really dive. It just kind of periscopes away as it just kind of drops back down into the water. Another name for Anhinga is water turkey, which you can see that big old long tail there is just beating against the boards, but. Anhingas, like cormorants, don't have oil on their feathers, so they have to sit there drying their feathers. They're fun birds. Just kind of another view of it, kind of periscoping away.
Very
This is
cool. We were in Florida last year, just a quick side note, and I was excited to see it was kind of like a wildlife drive. I think it was Lake Apopka near Orlando, and there was an Anhinga nearby the trail, and I was just excited to see the Anhinga. It was like, from Michigan. It's a cool bird to see. And then right next to it, maybe a foot away, was an alligator.
Yeah.
So like an alligator, maybe a foot and a half long. So kind of cool. They didn't mind, hanging out right next to each other.
That day, at least.
Yeah, right.
That day or that age.
Until the alligator grows up a little bit, right?
Yeah, just a little bit. And I suppose there could be an age where an Anhinga could go after a baby one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how big baby alligators are, honestly. So this is some Florida swamp lilies, kind of a fun plant that is apparently native to that area. Green heron, like right on top of the path, which
Very
was
cool.
fun to see. Gray catbird.
All right.
We had a lot of catbirds in Florida, and this is kind of some of the reasons that I like to travel. Is to kind of put birds into context and try to get a better sense of kind of what they are and what their habitat is. I developed a theory on gray catbird.
Okay.
Catbirds are Florida rednecks.
Okay.
Hear me out, man. I can say that because my father was an Ohio redneck. He grew up eating woodchucks and possums and Lord knows whatever else they could hunt or catch or fish for. I don't know. So Floral Lane, you walk Floral Lane, one of our local migration hotspots, on April 30th, and you're walking down the trail, and you're like, oh, black and white warbler. You're listening, you're like, oh, I think that's black-throated green. Oh, wait a second, is that an early Cape May? On May 1, apparently no difference. It will be nothing but catbirds. They're just singing their full heads off, is making as much noise as they possibly can make because of an arbitrary change in the days. And the reason that I know that comes from their Florida heritage is I was there over New Year's. And on New Year's Eve, it's kind of a quiet evening, and not much is happening, and maybe we're trying to watch some college football. I mean, Notre Dame might be doing well. And about 2 minutes to midnight, boom, 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 boom. I'm like, okay, some fireworks. You guys are a little premature, but I guess I won't hold that too much against you. And the clock struck midnight. For 20 minutes, There were 7 different places around our hotel room, or not around the Airbnb, that were just launching fireworks in all directions. The sky just glowed orange from the light reflecting off of the gunpowder smoke. The gunpowder smoke was enough to you couldn't even really smell the secondhand weed smoke. It was intense enough. So they took this change of days and minutes very seriously. And that's kind of what I learned about catbirds, and what I will remember when we walk Floral Lane on May 1 and the catbirds have flipped the switch and are now in the on position.
Yeah, they don't go off.
Gallinule.
Right. Looks a little different than the one we saw here in Berrien.
Yeah, we had a purple Gallinule in Berrien this last fall. It was this color. It was brown and green. It did not have any of the beautiful colors that this one does.
Look at that bird. Love that blue shield on his head. That's so cool. Even the one we saw was kind of starting to show that a little bit, wasn't it? Or was it blue at that point? I can't even remember.
I think our bird had a little bit, you could tell that it was going to have the shield, not unlike maybe I'm a purple Gallinule, but it hadn't, I don't recall there being much in the way of color there. I also don't remember ours having this bright of yellow legs. I think it had pale legs,
No.
But I don't remember, I feel like this yellow would have made it stand out, and that bird was an absolute bugger to find. The interesting thing, they sound a lot like our moorhens. If you listen to Sibley, if you listen to them back and forth, like the purple may be a little kind of whinier, a little bit kind of thinner, maybe higher pitched. As I'm listening to this video, listening to other purples kind of talk to it, it would be hard for me to really say, ooh, that's a purple Gallinule. Some people perhaps can. Towards the end of this video, Anhingas are calling. So that wah, wah, that's actually Anhingas. Can get to the right spot. Mr. Purple.
I'm not hearing anything, but
well, you'll have to join the screen. You'll have to watch it at the end. But there was some solid Anhinga sound behind there.
okay.
The Gallinules, it's on the Anhinga Trail. So when on the Anhinga Trail, do as the Anhingas do and stand there and dry your feathers in the sun. The other thing about purple Gallinule that I was reading in Sibley, these guys don't like to swim. And like our moorhens will swim, or common Gallinule, these guys were just leaping from lily pad to lily pad and just pretty much staying on the lily pads, which I guess if your habitat is just full of unhuntable 200-pound, 8-foot alligators, while a lily pad might not be my first choice of shields, it's still infinitely better than nothing. So I guess it makes sense that it would stand.
The barrier, right?
It's something that it would try to bop around.
Because he's not swimming at all. And I know when we went to Florida too, it was, first of all, there's about 200 to 1 common to purple. But yeah, the commons had no issue kind of swimming around duck style through the water. But yeah, that's interesting. He's actively avoiding it.
Yeah, he's trying to stay dry / out of Alligator Alley. And legitimately, you could have called this place, you could have called it the Purple Gallinule Trail. I'd never seen so many.
Wow.
We probably saw 20 purple Gallinules just walking this little, I don't know if it's even a half-mile loop along the Anhinga Trail. Another bird, I'm not sure how well the sound's going to come through for you, Josh. We'll see. Here's White-eyed Vireo.
Such a cool looking bird.
They were just singing their heads off in certain places, and their scold sound is legit. They're kind of the Vireos get after it on their scold song. I can't show Florida pictures without an alligator, can I?
Of course not. What was the largest one you saw down there? Would you say
they weren't huge. We probably saw 6 to 8 foot. I've seen some in Texas that were just massive, but these ones I wouldn't have loved, walking out into the swamp to retrieve a lost disc golf disc, but I think I probably would have. There's definitely some where it's just like, ooh, yeah, that could eat me.
Yeah.
Where yeah, that would just be like, okay, I'm just gonna drop $9 on a new disc, and they can have that one.
Yeah. Sounds about right. I think mine was probably pushing 10 feet, but at that same wildlife drive I was talking about was kind of cool. I looked down maybe 150 yards, and it was crossing the dirt road.
Oh
So it
my,
just kind of
just
came out of the water and crossed the road, and I mean it crossed the entire road from head to tail, and then it kind
yeah.
of went over.
Yeah, supposedly they grow about a foot a year. So if you had a 10-foot gator, it's about 10 years old. And doing a little bit of reading, the females top out at about 9 feet, give or take, and the males usually top out about 12. But they can get, I don't know, 15,
Okay.
16, 17, who knows. Well, that's what we've got for this week. Hopefully, this has been an entertaining post. We've got more coming. We've got plans already scheduled for the next one. Hopefully, that will post in about a week or so. In the meantime, all we can say is let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go birding.